Hello, and welcome to Crisis Communication. Tonight we've got several exciting things planned for class, at least we think they're exciting. A little later on we're going to be looking at phobias that people experience, and we're going to be looking at dimensions of suicide. But before we do that, we're going to look at what's called Schutz's theory of interpersonal needs. William Schutz maintains that people need to express and receive in three basic areas: inclusion, control, and affection. And that we do this to varying degrees, that we all need to express some degree of control over things, but there are some times that most of us want other people to exert control over us. We don't have to be in charge all of the time, although some of us think we need to be in charge most of the time. On the dimension of inclusion, and I'll be talking about these in depth in just a minute. Sometimes you want to be included, other times you express inclusion. And with affection, sometimes you give the warm fuzzies, the pat on the back, the nice positive strokes, and sometimes you're needing to receive those. So that's what we're going to be looking at for the next few minutes, because we're going to find that the loss of control is one of the key factors in the experiencing of phobias. Claustrophobia, for example, the fear of loss of control plays a big part in that. We'll also find that people who are suicidal, and it'll be the second half of class before we get into depth in this, and we have a guest speaker tonight who is a playwright, and I'll be introducing her to you a little later on, who's going to share some of her work with you. But we'll find that people who are suicidal are often people who are feeling shortchanged in the area of inclusion and or affection. So it's very germane that we look at this particular theory tonight. Okay, this is called a theory of interpersonal needs, and the first, as I mentioned, is called inclusion. And inclusion refers to the need that a person has to have satisfactory relationships with other people, to feel a part of the group. And Schutz has actually developed a questionnaire that one could fill out if you went over to counseling and testing. If you saw a good marriage counselor, they would probably be able to make this little questionnaire available to you. And on a scale of 1 to 9, you rank, or you score, you don't rank, you score 54 items and come up with a score between 0 and 9 on these different dimensions, and I'll put those up on a grid in a minute. But just kind of informally, you know, off the top of your head, off the cuff, whatever, how would you rate yourself on inclusion? How well do you express inclusion? Hi, come on in. Are you the sort of person that says, hey, we're going to lunch, you want to go too? Come on, let's go. Yeah, come on, knock it off, come on and go too. Or I'm having a party Saturday night, you're all invited. You know, do you express inclusion? Or do you just kind of sit around waiting and hoping that somebody will invite you? So your ability to express inclusion is one score, and you might want to just informally give yourself a little score of 0 to 9. This is unofficial, of course. It's not as effective as taking the questionnaire and really being tested with control items and so forth. And then how much do you want to be included? Do you like it when people say, come on and join us, or do you really wish they'd leave you alone? You know, and there are some people who would rather be left alone. And you can be mentally healthy, happy, well-adjusted, anywhere on these continuums. Okay, there are just some people who would rather read a good book and be by themselves, or sit outside in the yard with the flowers and soak up the sunset. And then there are others who would like to be part of a group. So this is the notion with inclusion. You can put a person on that 0 to 9 scale on a continuum. You know, 0, Schutz would say you're probably under social, at least based on the American norm, and with the norm being somewhere in the middle of that scale. Way down at one extreme, you have an under-social person. Then you may have at the other extreme an over-social person, who just includes everybody and everything, and they're kind of in your face all the time, and you wish you could get a little breather, you know, but you can't. And then right there in the middle is that nice social person who just seems to have a good balance. And then the distorted version of this is the psychotic, who's just really messed up on inclusion factors, you know, fatal attraction and this sort of thing. Okay, let's look at control. As you might suspect, control refers to the need to affect and have power over yourself and other people. And some people have a really high control factor. Okay? They're autocrats. They rule clearly and strongly and have to be in control of many things. The abdicrat is the opposite extreme. You know, they relinquish power. They'd rather somebody else made all the decisions. So, and then the psychopath, of course, is the messed up one. And somewhere in the middle, you have the Democrat with a little d, just the nice, balanced person who seems to have mixed political groups in the audience. But you have the person that has a sense of relinquishing as well as taking on responsibility. So, if you express control a lot, you know, give yourself an 8 or a 9. If you don't like to be in charge, if you always relinquish control, if you want someone else to control you, and they're really two different scores. If you never take control, then give yourself a 0 or a 1, something down low. If you take charge readily and easily, give yourself a higher score. And then that's a different thing from, do you want somebody to control you? Are you willing to be an Indian? Are you willing to follow orders? If somebody else is in charge of the committee, if someone else is the boss, is that okay? And if that's okay, if you'll take instruction, if you'll follow a leader, this is assuming it's a reasonable leader and, you know, not a terrible bad leader, give yourself a higher score, 7, 8, 9. If you would just really rather nobody told you ever what to do, then you need to give yourself a lower score. And we'll look at this some more. Okay, the third dimension refers to affection. How much do you need love and warm fuzzies? And how much do you express love, affection, warm fuzzies? And again, give yourself a score, so just for fun, between 0 and 9. If you express affection readily, if you can say warm, positive things to people, you know, if you give positive strokes, give yourself a higher score. If you're not good at giving it, but you need it, then your day is just really ruined if someone doesn't say something positive and, you know, if you don't get warm fuzzy. How much do you need that from other people? How much do you want affection from other people? Some of you are, then give yourself a score there too, you know, high or low. Some people are real touchy people who are huggy types who will run clear across the parking lot to hug a friend they haven't seen for 4 hours, you know, and other people would just really rather not be touched. And I remember patting someone just on the shoulder one day at the coffee pot and saying, "Good job," and that individual jumped about 2 feet and said, "I'd really prefer not to be touched." Okay, you know, so I didn't touch that person again. So where do you fit on those? A couple of really different people here. We've just, oh, well, listen, we didn't go through this part. If you're low at one end of the affection continuum, we'd call that underpersonal. If you're just all over people, you may be overpersonal. You know, you're too touchy, you're too warm and friendly, you're too affectionate, particularly to people you don't know very well. Okay, personal is the nice, happy, balanced individual, and the neurotic is the one that's messed up, and we'll look at the neurotic again in a minute. But the neurotic is taking it all in and not able to give. Okay, let's get a couple married here, or at least dating. Okay, now the I, C, and A stand for inclusion, control, and affection. And well, actually I didn't make these numbers. These are once upon a time I had these questionnaires and had people fill them out, but they've all been used up. So these were actually filled out by a couple of individuals who were married, as a matter of fact. When you get all these scores together, you have what's called a social interaction index. And obviously, if you have, I forgot how many items I told you. 54 items, thank you. 54 items, you're going to have a score between 0 and 54 if you had a 0 on everything and so forth. Okay, but anyway, we've got a person here who, up at the top, who expresses inclusion with an 8. You know, there are a few things they do on their own, but they really enjoy having people around. They invite folks over, they plan parties, they do things, and they include the people around them. This person likes to be included. They want inclusion. They want other people to say to them, come on, let's do this and so. You're invited to, come be a part of this. Okay, our very social person up here at the top, excuse me, has a very high control factor. This person's going to be in charge of every committee, on every board, maybe a CEO. I don't know, it's just a take charge type person. If there's an opportunity for leadership, they'll be snarfing it up. But this individual does not like to be controlled. And that's the idea here. Does this person want to be controlled? And the answer is no. They might let their mother or their spouse tell them what to do. Okay, but by and large, they don't like to be told what to do, and they'll be annoyed, or there's potential friction and so forth if that takes place. Okay, this is a very affectionate person. A 9 at expressing. They're great at giving warm fuzzies. They're great at giving positive strokes and verbal compliments and just saying nice things to people. But they also want affection in return. They need for you to reciprocate. And if they don't get plenty of warm fuzzies during the day, then they're going to feel shortchanged. They're going to feel potentially drained, but they're going to feel like they're not getting their fair exchange here. Okay, now down here we've got much more of a loner type. This person will express a little bit of control, but would really rather, of inclusion, pardon me, but would really rather be left alone. Give them a good book, a good dog maybe, or a beer, whatever it takes. But just leave me alone, let me do my own thing. I've envisioned the research scientist in the laboratory working until all hours of the night, or you and your computer up until all hours. But this is a person down the bottom who doesn't need people. Okay, it's just not important. This person is not a take charge person, but they don't mind other folks telling them what to do much of the time. You don't have an 8 or a 9 here. They're not unable to move until someone else gives them instructions. But they're willing to follow orders of whatever someone else suggests that you eat. That's okay. If someone picks out their clothes for them, I guess that's all right. I don't know. It depends on what. They'll be on committees. They may work hard, do a good job, and all, but they don't have to be in charge. Okay, they express affection kind of moderately, about average. Okay, not a highly affectionate person, but not stingy about it either. But they don't need much affection. Got a 3 down here. And so you add all that up, you get a social interaction index. Okay, should these two people get married?
No.
Karen?
My first reaction when I looked at those is that was Prince Charles and Princess Diana up there. Diana needs affection, wants affection, and...
Well, but does Charles give to... we better be careful on the air here.
But that was my first reaction.
You can sue her, folks.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. No, but it was obviously a very cool person, a very warm person, and that person who wants a lot of affection expressed and also would appreciate someone who appreciates getting it back is going to have a hard time with this person who would just as soon do without.
Okay. this person is going to be smothered by that one. The 9 and the 3 match up. Okay, so this one is just going to overwhelm that one. This 5 goes with that 8, so this person is going to shortchange that one. Okay, how are they doing on control? Better. Because this one's not going to tell that one what to do. And this one's going to boss that one around a lot. But most of the time that'll be okay. Okay, they may reach a limit when they say, enough, you know. Okay, and over here, what's going to happen?
One's constantly want to go out or throw parties, and the other one wants to stay home and by themselves.
Okay. Now, at the time these scores were turned in, this was a married couple getting along reasonably well. But this one had to go outside the home for activities. You know, the extra affection may be made up with children, with pets, with friends. But the main thing here, and we said at the beginning, any of these scores can be healthy. As long as you like who you are, you're happy with who you are, you can be the world's greatest extrovert, you can be the world's prime example of an introvert. That's your business, and it's your choice about who you are. And if you recognize these things, whether these are two friends or a married couple, as long as you recognize what's going on in the relationship, then there are ways to compensate for it. Just let this person go out and chair 14 committees and leave the spouse alone, or almost alone. You know, go to all your clubs and boards and organizations and whatevers and get all this inclusion stuff out, and then when you come home, get on the other end of the sofa and read a book. You know, play footsies once every hour or something. But, you know, see how you can work to compensate with these things if you choose to do that. Okay, I want to show you some. We'll come back to one other couple and we'll analyze them last thing here. But let's look at some profiles that Schutz gives us of people. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get here. Okay. Maybe we can get this one in here. Okay, that says Social Interaction Index. You know that. Okay, we're looking again at inclusion, control, and affection, and how much the person E expresses it, and how much under W they want it. Okay, the rock doesn't need anything. Now these are the extreme profiles just to give you a feel for the kind of person that we're dealing with here. Okay, but the rock doesn't need people, doesn't need inclusion, doesn't need control, doesn't need affection. I have trouble believing there's anybody in the world who's happy and healthy like that, but there probably are. Okay, the ball of fire at the other extreme is, you know, at the high end of the scale on everything. They express inclusion, they want inclusion, they express control. They don't really like to be controlled. You find some people, though, that can be in charge of many, many things and at the same time can still serve on some committees and in a few limited situations let other people tell them what to do. And then affection. They love everybody, this person does, and will take just as much affection and warm fuzzying and so forth as they can get. So these two are really extremes. Okay. Now when you have a dash, it just means the score there is irrelevant. Okay, here's your full-blown neurotic who wants, gimme, 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 and doesn't express anything. The neurotic sitting there wanting to be included, wanting somebody to invite them over, being depressed and frustrated because they're not included, waiting to be included. They need somebody to tell them what to do. They're not take charge people, but they're other directed. They're waiting for others to tell them what to do. And they need affection, big time, but they're not able to give it. Okay, so they're just kind of sucking it off of the people around them. Huh?
Black hole.
Ginger said that person is known as a black hole. That's a good metaphor. And maybe you've been around people like that just drain you. They can't make a decision by themselves. They can't go out and buy a hamburger by themselves. They need somebody with them. They want it. They need all of this, but they're not reciprocating. Okay. And these are not all negative. The ball of fire is not negative. That one's neurotic's pretty negative in my opinion. The rock is not necessarily negative. It's just where some people are. Okay, this last one, not the last one, but this next one. The affection of homebody, it doesn't really matter what the inclusion control scores are. The important thing here is that you have a 9 on expressing affection and a 9 on wanting affection. And this is just likely to be a strong family and friend kind of person, an affectionate person. How can you not be affectionate if you have 9s on both boxes? Okay. And we won't try to marry them because we don't have enough information there or make them roommates. Okay. Now, let's look at this bottom one first and then go back to the top. Because the bottom is the opposite of the neurotic. And Schutz calls this the hollow man. Could be a hollow woman too. But this is the person who expresses inclusion, expresses control, expresses affection, but doesn't want it from anybody. They simply don't need it. So this person may, invite people, but if you invite to whatever, to parties, to lunch, and yet if you invite them back, they never come. And you can't reciprocate. They may give gifts and give warm fuzzies and say warm positive things, but if you try to reciprocate with some of that, they'll brush it off or insist that you not, and so there's a 0 down there. A high control, but they're not willing to be controlled. Karen?
Well, that almost looks like that high control is why you're making in those 0s and those other 2, because if you need affection from people, or if you need people to include you, that's surrendering a little control.
In one sense. The way he's using it here, he's keeping the categories pretty separate, but I could see how you could make that distinction. You having a thought back there? No, I didn't think so. Yeah, Melanie, okay.
I'm looking at the hollow man, and I'm thinking that maybe that expresses a low self-esteem because they can't take compliments or affection or love back, but they give it because they feel that everyone's more deserving than themselves. Do you think that's true?
It might be. The theory itself doesn't really address the issue of self-esteem. So we can pull that into play wherever we want to. Like the neurotic, I would say, has low self-esteem, or they wouldn't be black holes. Sometimes it's hard to tell. The hollow man might have, hollow person, we should edit that, might have pretty high self-esteem and just think that they don't need people. I'm going to be nice and include you. I'm going to be generous and loving, but I'm okay. I don't need this stuff from other people. And if that's true and legitimate, then well and good. Jacqueline.
Wouldn't that also interpret as a person that's afraid of being vulnerable? They don't want to allow themselves to
Could be.
let somebody in their life that it relinquishes control.
Yeah, and it may get into the vulnerability issue of if I let if I admit that I want any of this, then I'll crack. You know, my shell will shatter and I won't be who I used to be. So yeah, you can project several things into this. And of course, most people, as far as I know, who take the questionnaire don't end up at these extremes. But if you've got somebody who's expressing at a much greater level than they're able to receive, then you've got a shell, you've got a distortion going on. Okay, look at the patsy. This is the old gullible person that you can get to do almost anything, the person that just can't say no. Look at the crucial scores there. It's a person who has remember the dashes are insignificant. But this is a person with a high need to be in charge and a person who needs lots of affection. So they'll chair a committee if somebody will just say, "Oh, you did such a good job. Thank you. Oh, they liked me. I did good. Let me go out and chair 5 more." You know, so somebody will give me a warm fuzzy. Now, I won't look at anybody in this room, you know, but many of us at least have been tempted, I suspect, to keep trying to do more and more to please more and more people, just so we'll get those warm, positive strokes. But if you can find somebody like that who's willing to be in charge and who needs lots of affection, and I think it was Albert Morabian, one of the nonverbal researchers, I think that was the one, who said that Americans are basically a touch-starved society. That if you, and this is borne out by some of Schutz's research too, and I don't have with me tonight the figures, but he's got norms after giving tens of thousands of these questionnaires. You know, he can say, well, the norm for control, for expressing control is maybe a 3.6, and for wanting to be controlled is a 6.5, or, you know, he's got numbers like that. And of course, they change from year to year as more questionnaires and tests are administered. But Morabian and some others that have agreed with him have said that Americans are, as I said, are basically a touch-starved society, meaning that we, as a whole, want more affection than we're giving. So a lot of folks walk around feeling shortchanged, wishing more people would say more nice things and give them warm fuzzies, pats on the back, a little note in their lunch box, you know, whatever it might be. And, you know, some of the moms of America are doing a good job with notes and lunch boxes and stuff. But there are employees that, you know, deep in their heart probably wish somebody would put a note on their desk or in their lunch box or whatever. But anyway, there are folks that are supporting that kind of research. Okay, here's a table hopper and a flower child. And these are our last stereotypical profiles. Okay, the table hopper is the one that's high on inclusion. They express inclusion and they want inclusion. And so you may find this person flitting around at the party. You know, there's some banquets you go to that some folks can't stay in their seat. I mean, as soon as they finish their salad, they're up bouncing from table to table. As the, you know, the entree's finished, and while they're waiting for dessert to be served, they're up moving around the room again the other direction. This is literally a table hopper. This person's expressing inclusion, wanting inclusion. Okay, the flower child loves everybody and is high on inclusion. Control is not an issue here because, you know, I'm not in charge, you're not in charge, we just are. What?
Total anarchy.
Yeah, total anarchy. Or just total being, kind of like the Hopi Indians, you know, we're just all in the present tense existing here. But the flower child expresses and wants inclusion. It's important to be included. It's important to be a part of this. And at the same time, they love everybody, and they enjoy receiving that love and affection from other people as well. So, okay, you got some little fun stereotypes here to work with. Okay, got one more couple here. Okay, here's a 37 and a 24. Now, these two are a little better balanced. Okay, just take a look at those for a minute and tell me either what's going to work well or not well with this particular couple. Let's give you a few moments to look it over. Okay, Jacqueline?
Well, it appears that they're going to have a problem with the control factor. One's wanting more than the other one wants to give. So they're going to be, or am I completely
Well,
wrong?
look at it. Okay, look at it. Is she right?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the opposite part. Yeah.
Okay, this one up here is expressing at a 9, and this one wants at a 7. So this one can be pretty pecked on, whether it's henpecked or rooster pecked, I don't know. You know, but the bottom person will let the other one boss them around pretty well. Okay, and that one wants to be controlled at a 2, and this one's expressing at a 1. So, okay, on power and control, they ought to be getting along pretty well. Okay, how are they going to do on inclusion?
Separate vacations.
Separate vacations. Okay, anything else you observe? Will one be better adjusted than the other? Better satisfied?
I think the 24 will be better satisfied than the 37.
Yeah, good. This one's expressing inclusion at a 3, and that one wants at a 2. That's a pretty good match. I mean, if you're only off one figure, that's okay. But this one's going to be frustrated. This one wants inclusion at a 7, and this one's expressing at a 1. Oops. This person's need here will not be met by that person. So can they not get married? Karen?
No, just the 37 is going to need to spend or find groups or people outside to kind of give them that additional inclusion.
Okay, yeah, the 37 needs some good, reliable friends that'll phone up for lunch or shopping or bowling or whatever. We don't have sex on these. So, you know, you can make either one the he and the other one the she, or two he's or she's or whatever. It doesn't matter. These are sexless factors. Okay, how are they going to do on affection?
They're pretty even. Well, they'll do okay with that. There's not going to be that many conflicts.
Will one be better off than the other? They're shaking their heads, yes, folks. You can't hear them, but the heads are bobbing up and down. We haven't figured out who will be better off, though. Karen?
Again, the 24, and that's just, I guess, a function of, almost every case we've looked at, the 24 just is generally expressing less need from somebody else. And the 37 here is saying, I want to give more than the 24 wants to receive. I want to get more than the 24 is willing to give. On both ends of that, then, the 37 is going to feel a little shortchanged.
Okay, good observation. 24 will pretty much be okay. Here, this person's expressing at a 7, the 24 wants at an 8. They'll feel a little shortchanged, but if they've got a good dog or a cat that purrs well, or a kid that'll sit on their lap while they read them books, you know, there's some ways to compensate for that. But this person is expressing with a 5, and this one's wanting with a 9. So if the 37 is counting on this roommate or spouse or best friend or whoever this is to meet their needs, they're going to come up shortchanged. Jacqueline?
But don't you think if the person that wants more control might interpret that, or am I just getting into this too much? They may feel like, because the other one wants to control more, and some people would interpret that control as some form of affection. They cared enough to tell me, etc. I've known some people that thought if they were controlled or dominated in some way, they thought of it as a form of affection or caring.
Okay. And
that might
takes us back
compensate the other.
to what we're saying last week about meaning is in the mind of the receiver. So I guess, I thought Nancy was thinking something. And if you interpret it that way, then for you, that is receiving affection. If I start telling you how to eat and telling you how to dress and saying, now come on, Jacqueline, I want you to do this and I want you to do that, what I'm really doing is expressing control. But if you interpret that as affection, we'll get along much better. If you
it could compensate depending on how they receive
Right.
it. Yeah.
Now, from Schutz's standpoint, from the theoretical perspective, my understanding is that he's isolating these. And by affection, he means real affection. By control, he means power and control. And I guess you'd say the assumption is that whether we classify it as control or affection would be classified how most people would classify it, how neutral observers looking in would. And at least that's how he gets the scores. And the questionnaire, like many questionnaires that you take, goes back through, I like to be with people always, part of the time, some of the time, most of the time, all of the time. You've got that continuum, and you're asked the same question with different permutations until you're sure you've answered the same thing 14 times. But anyway, it's coming through there with variations on the theme. Okay, can you see how these three dimensions would play into some of the crises that people have? Okay, we're not going back through all of transactional analysis. I just want to put the life positions back up that we were finishing with last week. But the person that says I'm okay and you're okay is likely a person whose interpersonal needs are being met, at least to a reasonable degree most of the time. Now, there are other dimensions of life besides inclusion, control, and affection. But a lot of the things that we do, a lot of what we experience, a lot of whatever can be grouped into those three categories. If I'm feeling that I'm okay, you're not okay, can you relate that to these dimensions? Karen?
Well, that almost seemed to be one manifestation of the hollow man thing. I'm okay, and therefore, I can issue invitations, but since you're not okay, I wouldn't dream of accepting any of yours.
Okay, good. Good. Okay. And I'm not okay, you are okay, you're okay.
How to become a black hole real fast.
Okay, yeah, that's a black hole in progress. Good. Okay, and I'm not okay, you're not okay. What?
I'm going to go eat worms.
Oh, how does that start?
Nobody loves me.
Oh,
Everybody
hates me. I'm going out and eat worms. Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, 4 is the full-blown black hole. Okay. Oh, what?
Looks like 4 would be a lot of 9 sitting there with, I want a lot of affection, I want to express a lot of affection, and I'm not getting anywhere to do this.
Okay, problem. These don't correlate perfectly with the numbers on the charts, or I'd have them all matched up for you. But I want you thinking about the life positions, because we find ourselves in different of those from time to time, and then how these other 6 factors start to interplay and work with that. Because we're looking at these kinds of things as we're trying to assess what the people are doing and why they're doing it. Okay, and we're going to look in just a moment at phobias. What's a phobia? Nancy?
A fear.
A fear. Okay. Well, Ginger, our ITV assistant, you can work your way on up here if you want to, is going to be doing a couple of things with you tonight. But the first involves and is a spin-off from some research that she did on a different project last semester that deals with phobias. And we both got fascinated with the subject. This is a new part of the course this semester because we got intrigued with some things that she discovered. And we're both claustrophobic. I'm not sure who's the worst, but that was part of what triggered or generated, spawned, I guess is the word, this research. So anyway, I'm going to relinquish the official teacher chair here.
I'm scared.
Yeah, no, don't be. It's fun. They're nice. They keep smiling out there.
That's good.
Yeah. Anyway, she's going to talk with you a little while about phobias.
Can you guys name some phobias? Nancy?
Heights.
Fear of heights. Anybody see the movie Arachnophobia?
Fear of water.
Fear of water. Spiders.
And I just mentioned one.
Claustrophobia.
And of course, the opposite of that, agoraphobia, which is fear of large open spaces.
True.
Homophobia.
Homophobia. Anybody else? Well, a lot of people have fears of different things, and there are some symptoms that are listed in the DSM-4, which is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual that psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers use to help diagnose what on earth is wrong with the people who come to see them. And these are some of the symptoms, thank you, listed in there. There's shortness of breath, dizziness or faintness. Have any of you ever experienced any of these? Heart rate increase. Trembling. Sweating. Choking. And this is actually choking. Your muscles actually constrict in the esophagus. Is that what you said?
Or in your trachea.
In your trachea. Nausea or abdominal pain. Am I going too fast? Okay. Numbness or tingling. This can occur in any part of your body. Hot flashes or chills. Chest pain. Intense fear. Can be fear of dying, fear of fear, fear of what's happening, fear of the environment.
Fear of making a speech.
Fear of making a speech, yes. Rapid breathing. And difficulty swallowing. For me, being terribly claustrophobic, I've really had to deal with this a lot. How many of you have ever gotten on the elevators in Arnold Hall between classes? You get up to the second or third floor and some idiot throws themselves into the elevator and it's already full. And you're stuck. You're in the corner and you can't breathe. And there's 15 people on the elevator, which is probably way too many. And the elevators in Arnold Hall aren't that reliable anyway. The other day, one of them dropped 2.5 stories and
According to the
Daily Cougar, dropped 2.5 stories and trapped 3 people inside for only 15 minutes. But if I'd been one of those people trapped inside for only 15 minutes, I'm really grateful I wasn't one of those people. And there are some things that you can do. That's not on there. Some things that you can do if you're caught in a claustrophobic situation.
I'm curious whether these people have ever. Have you had any of these phobias?
Nancy?
I got caught in an elevator and just stuck. It was in the basement of Arnold Hall. The freight elevator. And I knew it couldn't fall. But the thought that I might spend the whole weekend in there, I was hyperventilating, sweating. It was summer. It was unpleasant, and it only lasted, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes until some male student pushed the button on the outside and said, "Are you stuck?" No, I'm beating on this door and screaming because I have nothing else to do. And I got out and went and said, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." "No problem, lady." But have some of you been in these situations? What happened?
Let's see. Go ahead. Claire in the back row. I can't remember
That's
your
Lara.
name. Lara.
Sometimes I have a fear of flying, and I previously have taken long flights, like 12, 8-hour flights overseas, and sometimes I get so just all of a sudden just a fear will grip me, especially if there's air turbulence, especially if it's a really big plane, and I just feel like I have to get out, and I just start sweating and feel nauseous, and I feel so out of control. There's nothing I can do. I just feel like I'm going to lose it.
What do you do to help yourself level out?
Well, I usually have my family there, and they, try to calm me down or take my mind off of it somehow or another, or
strap you into the seat.
realize, I'm with hundreds of other people on the same flight, so I'm not in alone.
That's good.
Jason shaking his head. Did you get those same symptoms in your life?
On the way to Wisconsin, there was a lot of turbulence going down, and all the snowy weather and stuff, and the whole team was holding hands in order to cope with the situation.
It was a group phobia. Nancy?
Oh, I just wanted to say about claustrophobia. The strangest thing is with those sun tanning beds. A lot of people find them real successful. I can't stand it. It seems like everything's closing in on me. It's hard to relax in those. I have a big sense of claustrophobia, and I normally don't. It doesn't bother me that much.
Not having been in one, are they physically close, or does it just seem that way because of the heat?
They are close, and the top comes down on you, and there's not a lot of space in there. Although they're different types, but the one I was in was kind of uncomfortable.
Kind of like a waffle iron.
Jacqueline?
That reminds me too, the old MRIs, they were like a tube. I had to go in that, and I knew I was like an Egyptian mummy in a tomb. And the only way I could do it was to distract myself, because I was just borderline screaming. And
just borderline.
I just went, let me out of here. But
did they give you anything nice like Valium? Or?
No, I did it cold turkey. When she said, we have a microphone in there, so if you want to get out, you can let out a yell. And she didn't realize I take them seriously. Anyway, but what I did to distract myself was I counted the knocking sounds, because there's a lot of knocking sounds. Yeah. And then I woke up 40 minutes later. I actually put myself to sleep.
That's amazing. I should have met you sooner rather than took 10 milligrams of Valium to get me in that thing. And then I was still wide awake.
But they have open ones now because of that.
Oh, this was the open one.
No, I was in
the open one. I still took 10 milligrams of Valium. As soon as my head went under that thing, I go, get me out of here.
But in New York City, they're using vanilla, aroma pure vanilla. It seems to calm people who are claustrophobic so that they can handle that better. I know that I like wearing Shalimar, and it's vanilla based, and that seems to help. I don't carry a bottle of vanilla around with me, but perhaps I should.
But your next flight, Lara.
Yeah, it's worth the try. It's real cheap.
Yeah, the vanilla extract.
And they've had quite a bit of success. There have been several articles, and they're doing a lot of research with it now. But there have been 2 or 3 articles in the Houston newspapers and in the New York Times that I've read about it. Karen had.
I realized, I'm sitting here going, I don't recall really experiencing too many of these symptoms, and I realize it's probably because the things that might trigger this are things I can avoid for the most part. Like, the thing that I probably find the most disturbing that I'm conscious of is I don't like falling from heights. And I'm what I mean by that,
Bright lady here.
well, I'm talking going off high dives.
Oh,
which is normal.
And you have a choice.
Right, I have a choice on that one. I mean, I've actually gotten and I'm a good swimmer, and I like swimming in the deep end. So theoretically, all of that, and I discovered I don't mind being in the water. I don't even mind being submerged quite a ways in the water, because I'll do that voluntarily. It took me a while to isolate what I didn't like, and what I don't like is that the time I spend going through the air till I get to the water. I was able to isolate this at Waterworld because, if you had a tube where I was sliding through that until I only had a short drop through the air to the water, I was fine.
But it's the long drop.
I don't like being out in the air dropping down. And where's my son? My son loves that.
No, don't
Push me out of a good airplane.
Melanie.
I was just, as you were talking about that, I don't really think I have that many, I don't think I have any phobias, but sometimes in my sleep, when you're halfway in between REM and you're just kind of going to sleep, a lot of times I have these little, I call them daydreams, but they're while I'm almost asleep, and I'm walking off a dock or a cliff, and I always wake up going like this, catching myself. I think a lot of people do that, but I think subconsciously I'm deathly afraid of falling off something, but consciously I'm fine. But like I said, I always wake up catching myself grabbing the bed. It's really strange.
Well, I'll tell a story on myself that's really embarrassing. When I was 10, my family was camping, and I'm the oldest of 4 children. And I went to the restroom, and there were spiders in there. But I was already seated. And the spiders just seemed so big, and I was so deathly afraid of spiders. This could make me cry, but I'm not going to. And I started screaming, and I couldn't stop. And I screamed, and I screamed, and I screamed. And my parents, people finally realized who I was and who I belonged to. And my dad came and killed the spiders, and my whole family was so embarrassed. And they were so angry with me because I had embarrassed them in front of this huge campground full of people. So I decided that I would steel myself and learn to just kill them as soon as I see them. And so it took time, but I did. I taught myself that as soon as I saw a bug, I would just kill it. That before I had time to think about it, before I had time to be afraid of it, because it was just the worst feeling of total helplessness. And the spiders weren't about to bite me. They weren't that close to me. They were just in the bathroom stall. They were just there. And they weren't even that large of spiders. It just got me. My dad still gives me a hard time about it, but the other day, well, a couple of years ago, I told him how I had killed 6 spiders that week and had just been okay with it. And now that we live here in Houston, we have enormous spiders. And my kids are really afraid of them, but I said, just kill them. They squash just like any other bug. Just kill them. just do it before you can think about it, because it's a terrible immobilizing fear to be afraid of spiders, because they're everywhere, and you never know when you run into one. Edna?
I have one that's really weird. I'm not really ever scared of anything, except that I have a lot of recurring dreams about getting into a fight with my father and having him hit me, and I can never do anything. Kind of like feeling that you want to hit somebody, but you just can't do it. Like you're just in shock or something. It's just the weirdest thing.
Your fear immobilizes you.
And I wake up and I'm just like,
My sister's very afraid of snakes, and I think it's because of when she was young. We were in Bahrain, which is over in the Middle East, and my father saw this snake charmer on the beach. Says, "Oh, Melissa, come get a picture with the snake and his snake charmer." And she said, "No, Dad, no." And he thought it was all funny and everything, and put the snake on her.
Oh, no.
And even to this day, if she sees a snake on television, she starts crying and shaking.
Scared of that.
And I didn't know this was true until last year we went on vacation together to the Mexico, and we're sitting there and I saw a snake and I said, "Oh, look!" And I find them fascinating. I'll put my pen up, And I think she really got very upset, and I couldn't talk to her for like an hour. She had to be alone. It was very strange.
It's very stressful.
And all it takes is one dramatic event like that. I have a good friend. She has a PhD. She stepped on a dead cat when she was in college in the dark. They're going back to the dorms, going down the sidewalk, and she stepped on a dead cat, and it scared her half to death. To this day, she doesn't want to be around cats. I have 5 furry creatures, and when she comes over, I just have to put them all out, or keep her away from them, because she hasn't gotten rid of that.
Jason?
I don't know if this is going to sound redundant. I don't know if it's necessarily a phobia or a self-inflicted panic attack. But you know how when you're alone and you're in a wide open space and it's dark and you start imagining that there could be people in every situation. You imagine them behind the door. You imagine them around the corner. Is it a phobia? Is there a name for it? Is it just what you do to yourself? Is it?
Well, it's a fear.
Keep going like this.
Well, is it a fear of being attacked or
Are you panicking because
Just
you're
a fear that-
alone?
yeah. I don't know if it's the situation or why. But it's just one of those self-inflicted things. It's not like I'm scared of strangers or scared of someone attacking me. It's just in certain
More
situations
of
you
a
start
head
to put
game.
your imagination through every scenario possible. It's just frightening.
yeah. But what I'm wondering is what it is are you afraid that there's a robber in the house, or that you're going to be mugged outside in the dark, or what is it you think might happen?
It's more of the attack, but it's not like when I'm at home I feel comfortable. It's like when I'm up on the 6th floor of Arnold Hall and it's dark and there's nobody around and you're just walking
It's
around.
because gangs keep spray painting the walls when you least expect it.
I think it's just fear of the unknown.
That's good sense. Yeah.
It's paying attention. Nancy?
When you say on here symptoms, dizziness or faintness, are you talking about actually fainting?
So, yes, sometimes
Bec-
people do actually faint.
Well, because I've seen over and over again where the father of the expectant baby or whatever, either passes out in the delivery room or when they see how much it's going to cost, or things like that. That it's
That could be a
overwhelming.
panic attack.
Yeah.
Did any of you see that silly TV show? I think it was last night. Here Comes the Bride, There Goes the Groom, with all the things that went wrong at weddings. I mean, the cakes collapsed and fell over, all kinds of things. I mean, some were really sad, others were just funny. But an incredible number of brides as well as grooms passing out at the altar. In one case, the best man fainted. But stress, fear, until you know the person and know the situation, you just looking in on it, you can't know the cause, whether they're scared of being married or if they're breathing too much carbon dioxide off of candles and need oxygen. That happened at one Christmas pageant. They had all these little kids holding their candles so faithfully and marching in, and then they stood down front and one by one they started to drop over. But those weren't panic attacks. After about the third one dropped, the parents realized the poor kids aren't getting any oxygen. So, you have to look at the whole context and what's going on here. But yes, Julie.
When I was a child, we were in a restaurant and I went to the bathroom and it was a single stall thing and locked the door and I could not get it open. I don't know if it was the one where you push it in or it just would not open. And of course I screamed and threw a fit and I was bawling by that time and ruined the meal. But I can remember for a good year after that, I couldn't have a closed door around me in the house. I mean, I couldn't go to my room and shut my door. And if mom and dad shut their door, it scared me. I wondered, are they going to be able to get out? I mean, it didn't occur to me there is a window somewhere in that bedroom and they could climb out a window. But, and it went to what if there's a fire? Or what if, something happens? How are they going to get out with that door closed? And it was weird.
And frightening.
Yeah.
And the important thing to remember is that all of these fears are real. No matter how peculiar you may feel or the people that are in your life may feel about these fears, they're very real. Nobody would make this stuff up. It's too incapacitating. Nobody would choose. Well, I take that back. There are probably people who would make this stuff up, but not generally speaking. Another interesting thing that we found in our research was the average age of onset of some of these fears. For agoraphobia, it was 28.3, and most agoraphobics, I think 81% of the ones in the various research experiments that I've read about were married, which facilitated them being able to stay home, not get out. Often, agoraphobics became that way as a result of having panic attacks in places and not being able to get out, and there seems to be some connection between those things, as well as claustrophobia and agoraphobia. For social phobics, 16. That's not really surprising. It's during your teenage years is the time you're most susceptible to being afraid of being socially accepted or not fitting in. Claustrophobia, 20. I was very young when I developed claustrophobia, but I had a wicked uncle who chased me downstairs when I was 4, and my bed was very low, and I hid under the bed, and he sat on it and held me there for 30 minutes, and I remember that. And I was really terrified because he was mean. This man had parts of his fingers that had been cut off in railroad accidents, and he was proud of it. And this was a terrifying creature in my life. I was really glad when he and my aunt finally divorced. I didn't get to see him anymore.
But I was older. I was probably mid-20s. And I remember the first incident because it was on a airplane flight to Atlanta for a convention. And I really wanted to go. And it was a noon flight. The plane was loading. It was warm. Businessmen getting on, all the luggage bins open. And I mean, it's been a long time since I was petite, okay? Maybe middle school. And this woman that weighed probably, I had the seat next to the window, and this woman that weighed probably 300 pounds collapsed into the center seat, and her Jack Sprat toothpick-thin husband took the aisle seat. And I had about this much space in a warm airplane, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to scream and just climb over her, do anything to get out of there. But I didn't, because I knew they'd throw me off the airplane and probably not let me back on, and it was real important to make this trip. And I'd studied enough about nonverbal communication that I understood that my space had been invaded. Really invaded. And the only thing I could do was turn and look out the window and take deep breaths and try to, kind of like you were blocking things out, pretend she wasn't there. I mean, she wasn't even in the seat straight so that we could speak to each other. You know, I mean, because usually when you overflow into each other's airplane seats, which happens a lot, you at least exchange first names and get acquainted and, you know, okay, I know this person now, so, you know, if we fall asleep and our arms touch each other, all right, I can handle this. You know. But she was in my space, and it was awful. And that was the first real event, and then after that, other things, I think, seem heightened because of that. You know, the elevator incident was several years after that. But I'm real careful now to sit on the aisle. I'll fight for my right to keep that aisle seat, you know, so that only unless I'm traveling with friends. Now, if I'm on a forensics trip and I trust these people to move if I say move, you know, then it's okay. But no more high-risk stranger deals. Where are we on your list?
Dental phobia, 11.84, and from talking to several dental hygienists and dental technicians, some of their, a surprising number of their patients who are dental phobics were sexually molested as children. And so there may be some connection there. Anyway, I found that interesting from talking to them.
But for a lot of people, it just plain hurts.
Right.
And you'd rather not do it.
Not that everyone who has dental phobia was sexually molested as a child, just that a surprising number. Yes?
I can tell the difference between when I went to the dentist as a child and when mine goes. They look forward to it. It's no, you know, it's no problem. Some things they like better than others, but dentistry has changed a lot to cut down on that.
To eliminate those phobias. Here, you hold Mr. Slurpee, you know. And I remember Snuffleupagus hanging off the light fixture looking at my girls. And, you know, if you're good, you get to play with the treasure chest box. The dentist looked kind of like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Had an electric train running around the room. Really? I'll give you the address after class. Doesn't take adults.
And then fear of small animals, that includes rats, spiders, cats, dogs, anything. 7.25. And fear of blood, 7.32 was the average age. So it can happen at any time. Obviously, there are people who develop phobias at all different stages in their lives, and but a large majority of the people who develop phobias develop them through some traumatic experience or a series of conditioned experiences rather than being taught to be afraid. There are some people whose parents tell them over and over that they need to be afraid of snakes, they need to be afraid of snakes, they have to watch out, they have to wear boots in the high grass, and over and on until they just have this terrible fear, and then they see snakes, and it's like, yeah, so. What's the big deal?
And you'd stomp it before it
I
got
would. I would hit it a lot of times and make sure it was really dead and chop the head off, and then I would look at it. I've done it.
And there's some really nice snakes out there in the world.
Not in my yard. Yes, Jacqueline.
It just reminded me of something. My daughter, for the longest time, could not stand clowns, and I could never figure this out. And she didn't care if she went to the circus or not necessarily. And she always associated pain with clowns. And when we thought about it years later, the pediatrician had clown pictures all over. Oh, no. And every time I took her there, she saw the clowns, and then she got a shot. So she really hates clowns.
So that was a conditioned phobia.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's the little things, and you have to pay attention to them. Okay, there are things that you can do if you're having an attack, or if you're around someone who's having an attack. Believe them and believe yourself. Don't tell yourself you're crazy, because you're not crazy if you're having some kind of panic attack or some phobic attack of some kind. Breathe. Breathing is real important. A lot of times you just want to hold your breath or breathe real quickly, but pay attention to your breathing and try to regulate it, because that'll keep you from fainting, which is not a good choice if you can avoid it. And you need to often you need air. You need to change your environment. You need to get away from the small animal. You need to get out of an enclosed space. You need to get away from the blood. You need to, whatever it is that you're having a problem with.
Don't look at it.
That's right. You need to move physically to a different environment. And you have to think positive thoughts. This isn't going to last very long. I can deal with this. This will be okay. Because if you think back, your experience generally has been that you have been able to get away from it, and that it is just a short-term problem. A lot of research that they're doing now with teaching people just to cognitively deal with their phobias has been real successful, both in expected fear and in actually diminishing the amount of fear that they have when they find themselves in a phobic situation. If you have a lot of panic attacks or find yourself in a lot of phobic situations, it can become a vicious circle, and you may need to have some professional intervention. You may need some help, more than your friends or your support group or 12-step group or whatever you're involved in can do for you. You may need, some people need to be on medication. There are just different things that can happen, but you have to decide for yourself. If you have 4 or 5 attacks a week or a day, probably you ought to seek help. Because there's,
it could be becoming immobilized.
Yes, it could be, and you could become quite agoraphobic and be stuck at home, and just because of fear of having attacks in public places and having to have people with you. But there are wonderfully qualified people who can help you overcome many of these fears. It's important to know that you can live with your phobias, though, if you teach yourself coping techniques like breathing and thinking positively and moving. Just don't become immobilized. Make yourself move, or tell people. Be free to tell people, I'm really claustrophobic and I need to get out of this space, and you need to move or I'm going to hurt you, so that I can move, and I'm real serious.
The first thing I did when I came down to this studio, which is in the basement of the library, for those of you that haven't been here, was say, where is the exit? Because it's a long way back up the elevator and all the way across the library and out the front, and and if the lights go out, I want to know where the exit is. But they assured me that we have emergency lighting down here, that the staff has flashlights, and that the exit's right around the corner to the left. But I wasn't going to be able to cope with this, unless I had that kind of information. Now, if the door's locked, it's a whole different deal. But
definitely. Melody?
I was just thinking about my fear. I'm sitting here thinking there's got to be something that I'm afraid of, and I just remembered I'm really afraid of getting lost. When you're talking about it's hard to find your way out, I remember once in high school I met my father. We used to live in the Woodlands, and I met him in town for dinner. I was just 16, first trip I was allowed to drive by myself into the city, and he had said, okay, he drew me a map. He said, you're a big girl now, you're going to meet me for dinner, it's a big deal. Well, I got lost on the way home on Loop 610 and went around 3 times. I kept missing the exit, and I kept going through all the bad parts, and exiting all these strange places, and I got home 3 hours late. My father was just so stressed out, called the police. And ever since then, I've been very afraid of getting lost. So I'm the first person to ask directions. And I'll pull the car over if the person driving doesn't want to stop, because I won't get lost. So that's
You have trouble
one
with
thing
parking garages?
I have a problem losing my car in parking garages. I don't have a problem being in them.
Yeah.
I don't
well,
like
that's what I
being in
meant.
them.
Finding
Yeah.
a way around.
Yeah, recently there was one of those episodes.
Nancy?
I have an example of a phobia that got better. I was always deathly of, blood, that kind of thing, and then I had 3 boys, and because and because I love them dearly, and they've had every kind of accident imaginable. I remember sitting in Texas Children's Hospital, and a young mother looked at me and said, "How can you just sit there and stand that?" And it just dawned on me that a lot of the traumas that children go through don't really affect me in a panicky way. I mean, I just kind of accept them. What do we do now? And so it's gotten better.
But it makes a,
Go ahead.
this is short, it makes a difference whose blood it is. I mean, I can work with other people's children or at an elementary school or something, and there's a nosebleed, and I'm just handing them Kleenex and going on. But when one daughter had to have 2 stitches in her forehead, I didn't faint, but I just had that weak feeling in the pit of the stomach. This is my child getting stitches, and that made all the difference. But now my own blood, okay, I mean, I haven't lost a whole lot, but I think I mentioned here one time we had somebody on the 6th floor of Arnold Hall with a paper cut, and she was about to faint. She was, because it was her blood, and she was just looking at it and going wobbly on us. So it makes a difference whose blood it is.
But therapists that they've talked to say that many of the agoraphobic patients that they have, although they're totally immobilized, have a terrible time getting out of their house without their significant other or their parents or whatever. If in a crisis situation they become very calm, they handle the situation, they drive to the hospital, they do whatever is necessary until the crisis is over, and they're okay for a while, and then generally the phobia reexerts itself. But during crisis times, they kind of come out of themselves and become everything they need to be to deal with the crises. So that was hopeful. Also, not that anyone wants to live in a state of crisis, but, well, there are some people who do want to live in a state of crisis, but
At least they seem to want to.
That's true.
Seems like they make those choices.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to, thinking, Nancy's talking about one that got better, and I can give an example of one. I know exactly when what was the precipitating cause to bring it on, and I know what people did to basically cure it. Because this was a family who lived near us, and their son was my son's best friend, and so they played a lot together. And the family used to go out and take bicycle rides together, and they were out riding one day, and he was one of the very youngest. I think the only child younger than he was on the back of somebody else's bicycle, so he's the youngest one pedaling, and he's kind of farther back, so Mom's hanging back to be near him, just kind of keep her eye on him, and a big dog comes out of somebody's yard and bites Mom. Not the child, but it was terrifying enough to see Mom get bitten. She said she looked back and he turned white as a sheet and started pedaling for home as fast as he could. And that really immobilized him as a little kid for a while. He saw a dog on the street, and he would go in the house, lock the door, go upstairs, and his siblings would yell at him and going, "Look, the dog can't unlock the door when you let me in," he was doing everything he could to keep himself away from, because he had seen these things are dangerous. And, they tried lots of other things, and ultimately what they did to cure him of this is they got him a dog, a very small one.
Yeah, but one that he could manage.
Right, and so, and he, and that cured it, because now, that dog became his best friend when nobody else in the family wanted to deal with him. He could go outside and he knew the dog would love him.
Okay. We're running out of time here. Did we miss anything?
Just one thing, in extreme cases of phobias, on rare occasions, can lead to suicide, but very rarely.
And we'll use that as a transition and come back and talk about suicide.